telling of his life on film in just a moment, and the next chapter from his novel Jericho, that's at 2:30. And in between, we're heading back into the hedonistic lives of Jean-Paul Sartre and his love Simone de Beauvoir for the final time. And if you don't mind creepy crawlies, there's also A Year in the Life of Ants. For now, though, the final chapter of Bogarde on film. Dirk Bogarde recalls what he considers to be the pinnacle of his career, working with Glenda Jackson. The ratings, though, told another story.
And now, Bogarde on film. Dirk Bogarde reads an extract from his autobiographies about his film career. Episode 7, The Patricia Neal Story.
Anthony Harvey sprawled comfortably on the overstuffed settee in my hotel suite. Oh, thrilling that you're here at last. It all begins to feel real. Glenda won't be in for a couple of days. Her father died. Suddenly. You knew that. I said that I knew, but that I decided not to wait about in New York, but get across to California, lose my jet lag, and begin to find my way around again. Marvellous, marvellous. Absolutely thrilling. And we're shooting the whole thing on film, not tape. So don't think of television, think of cinema. It'll be TV in the States, but a real movie in Europe and the rest of the world. Cinema. Remember, it's cinema. Perhaps our very first error. The story at this stage called Pat and Roald was the true history of the appalling tragedy which struck the writer Roald Dahl and his actress wife Patricia Neal. During work on a film in Hollywood, she suffered a massive stroke and had, to all intents and purposes, become a vegetable. Only Dahl's determined, desperate cajoling, bullying and fighting got her through and brought her back to life eventually. The Dahls had been friends and neighbours of mine when I lived in Buckinghamshire, and when the subject had first been offered to me, I immediately telephoned them. They were shattered that a film was to be made of their private life, but they had no option other than to let the project go ahead. A book had been written with their permission about the whole tragedy, and thus they were, as they were firmly reminded, in the public domain. The film rights of the book had been sold, and they were helpless and powerless to stop the film. However, they seemed relieved that Glenda Jackson and I were playing them. At least we were serious players. And Roald was reasonably pleased with Robert Anderson's very sympathetic and un-Hollywood script. They generously gave us their blessings, and I had left for America with a fairly clear conscience. The carnigans and knitted ties I'd brought over at Roald's suggestion were now spread over the suite for Harvey's and the wardrobe master's approbation, when the telephone rang. Harvey answered it, there was a brief pause, and then he erupted in roaring fury. He slammed down the receiver, his face crimson with anger. We waited in silence for him to recover. What's wrong? Glenda? No. The script. Our glorious script. It's too long. That was the script girl. She just read it through with a stopwatch, timed it to the 10th of a second. It's 30 minutes too long. Well, how can the script girl possibly time a scene which we haven't even played yet? He looked up with a haggard face. As it stands, it won't fit the time slots for the commercials. It'll run over. But you said we were shooting a film, not a television film. He shook his head wearily. They're making cuts. It's too long. We looked at each other in despair. I knew, and Harvey and Ford knew exactly what this meant. We would be getting rewrites every day on pink, yellow and green pages. The script would be hacked to bits to fit the commercial breaks. Under these present circumstances, we couldn't hope to make a main feature film at all. All ideas of a movie, the bait on the hook, which we'd all so naively swallowed, must be set aside. I'd only been back in Hollywood for 2 hours, and nothing, it seemed, had changed. Not one jot, since I'd left it 12 years before. It was the same old place, the town of deceptions. Well, said Ford, with his customary reasonableness, if they cut it about too much, to such an extent that it no longer is the script that Dirk and Miss Jackson agreed to shoot, then they can, I imagine, pull out. My heart sank. More battles ahead. I really had no No more appetite for film fun. I'd had years of that form of exhaustion. "Well, let's wait until Miss Jackson gets here," said Ford. "She'll have something to say about this, I feel certain." When Glenda eventually arrived, she was far too exhausted to say anything. She came down to my suite the night that she arrived in a pink candlewick housecoat. She said it was her dressing gown and did I mind? I didn't. It was our very first meeting. We'd never even spoken on a telephone together. And it was an instant, miraculous joining. My failing courage soared. With this person at my side, I'd be able to fight all the bloody sponsors, producers and script girls. I thought that I passed muster as well, for as she was walking down the hotel corridor with her small entourage after a happy and even relaxing hour in the suite, I heard her say, "Well, he seems all right, doesn't he?" I felt braver than a lion. I needed all the courage I could use during the next 3 weeks. The first 2 days were fairly calm. We began shooting at 7:30 a.m. and worked through with half an hour for lunch on the spot until 7:30 in the evening. A tough schedule. There was no let-up. Glenda and I were in every scene, at least those which remained of the once rich script. From the tattered remains of Anderson's work, we retrieved as much as we possibly could, and Harvey, true to his word, shot the whole thing as a film, in long takes with low-key lighting and a sense of documentary work rather than glossy Hollywood. Screams and cries from the office. The results after 5 days shooting were deemed to be too dark. The sponsors couldn't see anything when they looked at their sets, but were entranced when they saw the material projected on a big screen. The performances were genuinely praised. The lighting was considered disaster. Fire the cameraman, fire everyone, then get lots of run-bys, that is to say, establishing shots of the locations, so that they will know where they are when they see it in the Middle West. How they saw, understood, empathized in the Middle West was the key to everything. They were the people who would buy the goods which we advertised on television. They were the profit. In order to hold this vast audience, and it was vast indeed, things had to be simple. People must be able to identify easily with everything they saw. Above all, they must be involved, and it stands to reason that you can't be involved if you can neither see nor hear. A turn of a knob on a television set is as lethal to commercial television as a button pressed in the death chamber. So, flood the film with plenty of light, no half-tones or shadows, so that people will see. Use simple words which they will understand. Have no subtleties in playing that get in the way of the direct approach. Most of our story was set in a hospital and necessitated a good many incomprehensible medical terms and distressing sights. Glenda spent half the picture lying flat on her back, bandaged like a mummy with tubes up her nose and stuck in her arms, only able to communicate by animal grunts and cries. So we were on a pretty sticky wicket from the start. But we stuck firmly to our intentions, in spite of daily screams and thumping fists. It was a battle for banality against quality, and it raged unabated. People were frequently fired, even removed from the set by physical force in the very middle of shooting a scene, something I'd never witnessed in over 30 years of filmmaking. But there's always a first time. And the crew, with good reason, grew more nervous and despondent. But Glenda and I hung on grimly. We all knew that we were salvaging something from the tottering edifice, enough at least to make a reasonable, if compromised, movie. Eventually, with half the film safely in the can, we finished work late one night in a heavy desert mist, everyone streaming with flu, caught, we were all quite certain, from the redundant hospital in which we'd been working and which had been stripped clear of everything except germs. I got bronchitis in the last 3 days and lost my voice completely. Stuffed with cortisone in order to shrink the vocal cords in a hurry, I managed to croak my way to the final shot. Glenda survived intact. She's not the sort of person to succumb to anything trivial. The second half of the film was to be shot in England, but not until the summer, when Glenda had completed the run of a new play she was taking to Broadway. The film was put on ice until June, the American crew miserable that they would not be able to finish the job. On that final evening, they made a presentation to Glenda, myself and Ford, of 3 pearl-handled revolvers in the form of cigarette lighters, as a token of their regard. We were very much moved. To England in June, a little less hectic atmosphere and continual help from Roald Dahl. Glenda worked daily with a voice therapist who helped her to invent a manner of speech which, while comprehensible, suggested the inarticulate manner of speaking which a victim of paralyzing stroke would use. It was distressing, but appallingly real, and we finished on a dull, wet English summer evening, comforted by the fact that we'd made a film as authentic as possible to its origins. It opened in America in December as the Patricia Neal story, to quite sensational reviews. Glenda and I were praised extravagantly. The telephone rang almost daily with calls for interviews from newspapers and journals. It was prime time, coast to coast, and the movie of the year on television. Or so you'd think. We finally reached the peak of euphoria when it was rumoured that Glenda and I were each nominated for an Emmy, the television equivalent of the cinema's Oscar. And, perhaps best of all, news came that it was all such a success that the movie version, retitled Miracle of Love, was being hurried into Los Angeles cinemas to qualify for the Oscars in April. And then the television ratings came in. I don't exactly remember what they were, but they weren't any good. The Middle West had turned off after about 15 minutes to look in at a popular series called Heart to Heart, which starred Robert Wagner, whose wife, Natalie Wood, had died in a drowning accident a few days before. Then I understood the colossal power of television to make or break. The telephone stopped ringing, no one got an Emmy, and the movie version, if it ever really existed, slipped quietly into oblivion. Was it honestly as simple as all that? Was more than half the population of America really so concerned about poor Robert Wagner? Or was our film perhaps too painful, too distressing, too gritty and grainy? Did the hospital, bandages, drip feeds, and inarticulate speech put them off? Was I too bullying or too British? The imponderable questions remain imponderable. Only the harsh facts of the ratings proved the glaring truth. We'd flopped. But there was never the least feeling in my mind of doubt or regret. Working with Glenda Jackson was one of the highest peaks in my career as an actor. As strong as teak, as pliable as plasticine, as professional and dedicated as any actress I'd ever worked with. We joined together seamlessly, and the work we did was stimulating and exciting. When we were together, united in a scene, we were absolutely isolated by performance. Many actors have actors' energy, but most don't know that they have, or how to use it. It must be cherished, like chastity, guarded, husbanded, kept gleaming and bright, and the only possible way to do that is by concentration. Concentration so intense and so hard, so deep, that it causes almost physical pain. And that's the way it was with Glenda and with me. The physical and mental release after playing a scene perfectly, or as near perfect as one can try to achieve, is so draining that it often feels as if one has just played an exhausting game of squash. Sweaty, weak-kneed, drained, limp from effort. It seldom is, but when it is, an audience will react instantly. The experience disturbs, excites, and involves them completely. The film was eventually shown on British television by a commercial station who apparently decided that New Year's Eve was the perfect time to get rid of it. There would be no one at home to watch it, and no one was, as far as I could ever find out. It was a bitter blow to us, but that was that. It all might never have happened.
Dirk Bogarde was reading the final extract from his autobiographies. Bogarde on Film was abridged by Neville Teller and produced by Janet Whittaker.
That was Dirk Bogarde reading from his memoirs, Bogarde on Film. The producer was Janet Whittaker. And if you'd like to hear Dirk's voice again this afternoon,